How do you pronounce your last name? It's been killing me.
Knutson.
It is, okay, the K is not silent.
Knutson.
Yeah.
Knutson.
So it's like you're on a canoe, add the T, and then a son. Knutson.
Knutson. Okay. I'm glad you asked that. I was thinking that in my car.
Yeah.
And I probably would have said
It's a weird one. Knutson.
Yeah.
Knutson.
That's what I was-
Knutson.
Knutson.
Okay. There we go.
Yay.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
There we go.
Yeah, you ready?
Yep. Let's
Want
go.
me to intro?
Sure.
Okay. Hi, friends. We're back again for episode 5 of That's What He Said.
Yay.
Today, we are interviewing our first guest, Jen
Yay.
Knutson.
Yay.
our
So
sister
excited to be
friend.
here. Yes.
Our first official episode with a guest.
Yay.
Exciting. I feel very honored, my friends. I feel very honored to be the first one.
Yes.
Yay.
Welcome to the Girls Club. Our little,
Thank you. Pink, you know?
I know. You came in theme, on brand.
Yes.
And we love that.
I appreciate what you guys are doing. So, wanted to be on brand.
Thank
Well,
you.
we appreciate
Welcome to the
you
pink party.
being willing to come on our show.
Yes.
At the beginning stages, but we appreciate it.
Of course.
We really do. We're
What our
so
friends
excited.
for. Yeah.
Yeah. We're
Yeah.
so excited.
Me too.
First person from like our church community, and we've talked about how so many people in our church have amazing stories and backgrounds
Absolutely.
and different like interests and career paths. It's like
Yes.
amazing. Just
We are
the
very
people.
blessed.
Yeah, that we
Yeah.
can, even just in our lives, like the resources we have within each other
Correct.
is incredible.
Agreed. Yeah.
Like God brought together a really amazing group of people, all with such different talents and specialties.
Yeah, and that just like
Yeah.
solidifies everyone's like stories of getting here.
Yes.
Like if
Yes.
that isn't enough to show you that like this church has a purpose and it is in God's will for big things, like I
Yes.
don't know what else proves that, you know?
Agreed. Yes.
It does.
Like I've never been around so many different people who have all these outlets and talents and
Yes.
like everyone is tapping into
Yes.
it.
But that also goes back to Pastor T and Pastor Lorna, right? That's what they've wanted from the get-go is to see what Whitestone is going to do for all of us, not just in our spiritual life, but outside of that,
Yeah.
you know? Because no matter what we're doing, we're a light for Jesus, right? That's what we're supposed to do. So I think the
In
church
all things,
helps us.
Yeah, we're like
Yes.
building in on Sundays and then going out in the community and
Yes,
spreading
exactly.
through our business and being marketplace ministers
Yes.
and all that we're doing.
Yes.
So Jen is with us. Jen is a naturopath.
Yes.
And I kept saying it over and over again in my head to
Yes.
make sure I was saying it right.
Perfect. Yes.
And you can find her on Happy and Healthy with Jen on Instagram and also happyandhealthywithjen.com.
Perfect. Yeah.
We'll get more into that, but we're going to be talking about health. We're going to be talking about Jen's new course, kind of just all things health, God,
Her
how
own testimony.
yeah,
I know you
how
wanted
Jen
to
got
share your
here.
story. I
Yeah.
love your story.
yeah.
It's a complex
Speaks
one.
to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the perfect place to start is kind of how you got here and how we all, because how you
Yes.
got here is how we all got connected. If you weren't here,
Yes.
you were kind of saying on your stories, I had shared my like very brief bit of my testimony at church.
Yes.
And you're saying how yours is similar, that you were in Austin also going like, what am I
Yes.
here for?
Yes.
Like, why am I here, God?
Yes.
And then you went to the church and it was like, oh,
this is why.
this is it.
Yes.
And it all clicked. So
Yes.
if you want to start with just like giving us
Yeah.
your story and your testimony.
I'll probably sprinkle my testimony throughout because it's very complex, but I'll just share how I got to Whitestone is a good place to start.
Yeah.
So I think for me, to be honest, it started like probably about 7 years ago. I was living in Australia and found out that my husband was having an emotional affair. And that was ongoing for 2 years. And after finding out about it for 3 times over that course of 2 years, I finally went and chatted to someone at my church and said, look, as far as I know, it's just emotional. It's not physical, but do I have grounds for divorce? Because I just can't, you know? And they said, we're not recommending or advocating for you to get divorced, but yes, he's brought a third person into the marriage. And so that's why I was like, okay, I'm out. But during that time, I wasn't ready to come back to the US because I had a dog who I knew wasn't going to be able to come with me. And I listened to Pastor T's music. So Hills and Valleys was the first song that I had ever heard by him. And I was constantly listening to Known, like that whole sort of album was constant there to kind of get me through. And so eventually I came back and moved to the US March 28th of 2022. I came back to the US, but I moved to Utah. because the family that I'm closest with was there, even though they're from Houston, they just happened to be living there. So I was there for 3 months, and they said, well, we're moving back to Houston. And I'm like, well, I moved back to the US to be by you guys, so I'll move to Houston. And in that time, I reconnected with someone who I used to work with 19 years ago. We had connected right before I said I was moving back to the US, and after 3 months of being in Houston, I moved to Austin to be with him. And so that's kind of why I came up here. But a week after that ish is when things started to not go very well in our relationship. And it took a while for me to leave, but I was like, my family even said, well, why don't you come back to Houston? I said, I'm supposed to be here for this church, you know? So when Pastor T said, oh, I'm going to be doing a concert in Georgetown, right? I was like, great, I'm going to go listen to him. Fantastic. Like,
and at that point, he's just Torrin Wells. Like, he
correct.
wasn't our
pastor,
he
correct.
Wasn't like,
yes.
He was just like, oh my gosh, going to see Torrin Wells.
And it was so exciting, right? I was like, oh my God, yes. And when he announced, hey, we're going to open up this church, I was like, that's cool. I like your music, but I don't know if I'm really going to like what you do as a church. Kind of like how Joseph said he was very skeptical. Yeah. Me too. I was like, okay, I like you as a singer, but I need something that's going to check all my boxes, you know? And so I went to the Discover You, and I was like, okay, tick, 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 all of them, like, green light, let's run and let's do this. And so I was like, let's go all in, and I have gone all in, and that is what has kept me here, because outside of that, I didn't know anyone. I knew nobody. And so when I broke up with my ex, it was a very hard time, and I will get kind of into that a little bit more, but if it was not for Church of Whitestone, A, I wouldn't stay in Austin, and B, I probably still wouldn't be here on this earth. Like, literally, it was a tough time. It was a really tough time.
But I think God was preparing you for this season, in that season. Like, the same I feel like with myself. Like, I went through those months, like 6 months of just complete isolation. I was like in this apartment, I felt like I was staring at the walls. Like, I would get off work, it's like me and Camry in there, my dog Camry, and I just literally felt like I was staring at the walls. I was like, I'm by myself, I don't know anyone, I couldn't wait to get out of here. But now it's like, okay, God was just preparing me for all that was to come.
Yes.
I mean, I think if I like filled my life with all these things, then I might not have been as ready to like accept everything that Whitestone has brought into our lives.
Including the relationships, right? Because if we already had set relationships and friendships, we might be like, yeah, these people are great, but not gone the extra effort to go hang out with each other.
Like, I've got plans this weekend, or I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And I think you as well were in this season of isolation.
Me too. Yeah. I grew up here, so I do have people that I know. Unfortunately, like, those relationships aren't as strong as they used to be, and that's okay. That just comes with growing up. A lot of them were childhood friendships, and I still love them, but we just aren't on that same level anymore. And so I kind of
like ready to embrace the friendships and the community.
Truly, honestly, God never ceases to amaze me, because I like listening to your story, my story, other people's stories of just doors closing in preparation for this, and that just excites me for like what's next, because you know, like, this is an amazing thing, but like, what's next, because there is something coming. And it's going to be amazing in all of our stories. And I don't know. It's just like every day I get in my car, and it's usually when I come here, because we're in that mindset. Yes. But I'm just like, dang, look at that. Look at God. Look at that.
Yes. Yeah.
Over and over and over and over again.
Yeah. So.
God is pretty cool.
He's really cool. Yeah. So we spoke briefly about you being naturopath. Yes. And most people in America, we refer to it more as like holistic medicine. So if you could just give people kind of a broad definition of what that entails.
Yes, yeah. Most people look at me here like, huh? Well, what are you talking about?
Maybe you can even, if you want to like differentiate it from like Eastern medicine, if there are differences, because again, that's something that I'm curious about. Like, is it different, or is it kind of along the same?
So the broad thing of being a naturopath or naturopathic doctor, however you want to say it here, traditional naturopath, I feel like we have a lot of different terms here, but essentially, as a naturopath, I'm looking for the root cause of someone's symptoms, rather than, you know, Western medication and medicine in general is like, oh, you have eczema, let's just treat your skin. Oh, you have depression, let's just treat your neurotransmitters. You know, oh, you have heavy painful periods, let's just treat your sex hormones. Those are all just symptoms. So as a naturopath, we look for the root of the issue, and we look at all of the body systems together, because every body system influences and impacts one another. And so if you're having a skin issue, well, we got to look at your digestive system and your nervous system, and you know, looking at all the body parts together. And then I don't prescribe medications. I will prescribe nutraceuticals, so meaning like vitamins, minerals, herbs, amino acids. And then I look at your diet, your lifestyle, how are you exercising, you know? So I'm a big fat nerd. This is what I tell people. I'm a nerd who loves all things health and wellness, essentially, because yes, I'm a naturopath, but I'm also a nutritionist, but that came later. So I did my bachelor's and my master's in psychology first, and then another master's in health education before I pivoted and got into what I'm doing now. And so I'm still a personal trainer and a wellness coach. So I kind of bring in all of the hats so I can really treat you as a whole body, not just this little thing over here and this little thing over there, but all of it is natural. So it does pair, I guess, a little bit to Eastern medicine, where a lot of that is herbs and, you know, essential oils and different things. So I use those in practice as well. But I guess I don't always do like meditation, but because I think that's, as a Christian, we don't really do that element, you know?
Right. And there's I feel like a huge need, or a huge desire right now for people to go the more natural route.
Yes, thankfully.
Yes. A lot of people's eyes have been open to the different things in everything, like in our foods, in our skincare products, in our laundry detergent, our toothpaste, like everything we use. And that's it's a great thing. And you also were talking about on your website being low tox.
Yes.
And I was curious on that as well, because I actually didn't know fully what that means.
Yes.
And so to kind of share that also.
Yeah. So a lot of people will say, oh, I'm toxin free. And I don't think that is really possible. You know, there's always going to be some trace toxins, but living a low tox lifestyle just means that you try to get natural products, natural food, you know, as much as possible. So like you were just saying, everything from your makeup to your skincare to the shampoo you're using to your floor cleaner and your dish soap, like all of that impacts your health and wellness a lot. Like the scientific term is an endocrine disrupting chemical. The endocrine system is your hormone system. And then we wonder why so many people have hormone issues, because they're, you know, slathering all this stuff on, right? So even for me, that was not a piece of my puzzle until I got sick in my late 20s. And one of the things that I was diagnosed with was Hashimoto's thyroiditis, so the autoimmune condition of hypothyroidism. And as I looked back, I was like, okay, two things make sense. Every autoimmune disease starts in your gut. I had gut issues starting from when I was like 5 years old, not a strange thing. And then trauma can kind of play into that, behind a lot of autoimmune stuff. And my dad committed suicide when I was 16, so that was a trigger. But I was the perfume queen. Like everyone knew, if we're going through duty free or it's a birthday or a Christmas or whatever, you're getting Jen perfume. And I would spray it over my thyroid multiple times per day. And then it's like, oh, okay. And so I'll share more of kind of my health stuff as we go, but all of my other health issues rectified in 2 years when I fixed my diet, my lifestyle, and supplements. But my Hashis didn't go into remission until I went low tox. And that's where I got so passionate about, hey, we got to talk about this stuff. And I think social media is beneficial for some things, in that that's where so many people are learning about these toxins, right? Oh, what should I swap to? Ooh, these are impacting me, because it wasn't talked about before.
No,
right?
and it's really not still talked about on like mainstream media.
No.
But that's where you do get the benefit of social media, is you have these more niche people talking about like specialties and things they've discovered. And so you can kind of look up or access anything you want, or like anything you need. If you're having an issue, you can kind of see and find other people who struggled with that.
The biggest
and their
thing
solutions.
I've seen in terms of like low tox is like switching from plastic containers to
glass,
glassware,
which is huge.
Yeah, especially like with drinks or Tupperware to glass containers.
Yes.
Like I think that's really the only. Also in makeup, I guess, like there's low tox things that I've seen with makeup and stuff. But I would like to see more of it, because I'd like to see where I can change.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. I guess that really is the most, and like the Starbucks cups and the heat. And like putting the hot liquid. But
and there's a balance, right? That's something that I always try to tell people, is like, you can't change everything overnight. It's not realistic. It's not cost effective. But also, there is a fine line between worrying about these things and then becoming obsessed over them, right? Like, oh, I can't have this because, like, let's say you popped and have a Starbucks or a hot tea from there. Oh, that little baggie has microplastics. I can't have it. Like, that's going to cause so much stress.
Yeah.
And then stress wreaks havoc anyway. So it's finding a balance.
It just would become a spiral at that point.
Yes.
So,
Yes. We do have a responsibility, but this is something where too, as I've been writing this course, it kind of opened my eyes where it's like healthy living, whether that is through diet, exercise, lifestyle, whatever, or again, becoming low tox, it can become an idol, right? When you are way too strict on it and you are thinking about it, now this healthy living is an idol. And some people, it can kind of go hand in hand with some self-righteousness there too, right? Like, I don't eat that food. I would never touch not grass-fed and finished meat. Do you know what I mean? Like,
so that's a good point.
Yes, we have responsibility, but we got to check ourselves as well.
Yeah.
Right? So that it's not an idol.
Self-righteousness, like, turns me off to certain aspects because I'm like, okay, well, I'm thinking about the people who can't afford sometimes to reach that level of like awareness, because one thing that I hope to see change is that it becomes less expensive to take care of yourself. I would love to see that, because I do feel and understand that people who live in a cycle of poverty just don't have access to that kind of stuff. And to me, when I see people like, I only eat beef if it was raised in my backyard. I'm just like, ugh, rolling my eyes. Like,
yes.
But
I get it. That's real life.
But I, on the flip side, it is something that I'm curious about, because I don't have a good history of like my diet and stuff. Like, I will admit, like, I struggled for a long time, but it was also like my surroundings and my environments that led to bad eating decisions. And I'm slowly getting into.
You were talking about how you're cooking a lot more.
Yeah, I'm cooking a lot more, not relying on like the frozens because it's convenient, or it's like cheaper. Like, I am trying to get like my proteins that are fresh and
well done.
Like it's little steps here.
Progress, not perfection, right? Yes.
So I loved this phrase from your website, helping women become happy, healthy, and get their life back. And that struck me because when you say getting their life back, that's huge. A lot of times we don't realize when your health is off, it affects so many other aspects of your life. And I'm sure that plays into your health journey too. And you kind of want to discuss that and why that statement became kind of a mission statement a little bit of your company.
I was speaking to myself, really, because I was always, on the whole, quite healthy, you know, nothing major until like 26-ish. So my periods, when I started at like 13, were always heavy and painful, and I would have to skip school or work and those sorts of things. And again, I had some gut health issues, but on the whole, I feel like I was pretty good. But I did go on the pill at 18 because my periods, again, were super heavy and super painful and very irregular. And I was on it for 6 years. And then I was getting migraines to where I would lose like half my vision. And that was not normal for me. Like, you know, I have had migraines where you'll see like a little aura, little sparkly lights, you know, and then I would get a migraine, but never losing my vision. And I was living in New Zealand at the time, and I went to the doctor, and he looked at my health history, and he's like, you have a history of migraines. You should never have been put on this. And I'm like, all the doctors and all these places I've lived has never this particular type of birth control, where it's the combo pill, estrogen, or the synthetic estrogen and synthetic progesterone. He's like, you should never have been put on it. So you can come off or get on a mini pill or whatever. So I said, look, I've been on it for 6 years. Let's just come off. And I didn't have a period for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
But it was 6 months in, I went back to that same doctor. I'm like, hey, my period hasn't come back. And he's like, well, it's kind of normal because you were on the pill for so long. Give it a little bit longer. And then I moved from New Zealand to Sydney, and it was now a year. So I phoned that doctor because I was like, you picked up on something. I kind of trust you, right? And he's like, well, you should probably go get tested for PCOS. And so I was like, okay. So I did. And I remember clear as day, 27-year-old fit personal trainer, went to get my test results of like internal, external ultrasound and bloods and things. And my left ovary was completely black because there were so many cysts on there. And the right one had a whole bunch as well. But this doctor like handed me my stuff and said, you have PCOS, you're infertile, you will never have children, and IVF isn't an option for you. And
Just like that.
Legit like
Oh,
that.
my goodness.
And I was like, oh, I've never been maternal. I've never been dying to have children, but I've always wanted the option. Yeah,
right.
It was crazy. I was like, oh. And so I literally said to him, because I didn't have the background that I had now, so I didn't know all the questions to ask, but I was like, well, surely there can be something that can be done. And he turned to his little computer, went into Google, PCOS, printed some things out, and he said, there's nothing that you can do. Here you go.
Did not.
And he sent me on my way. And I was like, wow, that's bonkers. So over that next year, I went and saw 4 other doctors and a naturopath, and nothing changed. I just got more diagnosis after diagnosis after diagnosis. So it was like adrenal fatigue, my liver was worse than an alcoholic's, and I don't drink, the Hashimoto's thyroiditis, just a laundry list of things. And again, I tried the medical way and nothing changed. And I posted something on Facebook complaining, like, of my health stuff. And a friend reached out and said, hey, my wife has gone through some of this. You should get in touch with her. So I was like, I've got nothing to lose. Let's do it. And I did. And she talked to me about diet and the right supplements and things. I completely overhauled my diet and changed the way that I exercised. And 3 months later, my period came back.
Wow.
It took another 2 years to fully regulate, but now at 42, my periods are bang on. If I want to have kids, I can have kids. Mm-hmm. PCOS is lifelong, as is Hashi's, but they can both go into remission. And so technically, mine are in remission. My liver is perfect now. I no longer have adrenal fatigue. Like, all of that just really healed.
Wow.
But in that time, there were days, like, I literally woke up one day and I couldn't get out of bed. I had to sleep for like 8 to 10 hours every night and schedule my personal training clients to where I could go home and take a 2 or 3 hour nap every day. I was not seeing friends. Again, I had to change the way that I was eating. I was very isolated. My life was gone. Mm-hmm. And so once I healed and I was like, wow, I feel so much better, like the best I've ever felt in my life. I was like, oh, I have my life back. Now I can travel. I can engage with people. I'm happy. I can smile. I can do the things that I want to. And so I know for me, that's where that statement came from. But even working with people, for example, I'm working with a guy, he's a 21-year-old boy who has ulcerative colitis. And his mom reached out to me because she's like, Jen, he doesn't leave the house. He's scared to leave the house because he has to be by a bathroom all the time. He is eating like 10 foods because he's scared of other foods, upsetting him, And so we worked on some stuff, and now he's like, Jen, I went out to the bar with my friends. I didn't drink, but I could actually go out and sit with them. And he went to like a country concert, and that's not having a life, right? Just where you're so restricted. Now he has his life back, right? Like, you can do the things, and it doesn't always have to be that extreme, but when you're not feeling good, you can't go do the things that you enjoy. Your relationships will suffer. If you're tired and you're a parent, you're not going to engage with your kids the way that you want to, which can mess up your mental health there as well, right? Feeling like a bad mom or whatever that is. If your thyroid or whatever is out of whack and you don't have a libido, that's a huge thing that women come to me for is, hey, I just don't want to have sex. But sex in a marriage is a beautiful gift, right? It's also how we connect to our partners and things as well. And so it's like, let's fix that physiology, and then that connection between husband and wife gets even stronger again. So it really is, I believe, helping people get their life where it's like, God wants so many amazing things for us, but if we're not feeling good, we can't carry that out, in the simple things.
And it's the man-made things that are sending us down the path of like a spiral of health effects and things like
I
that.
can attest to that. My last boyfriend, he didn't live a healthy lifestyle. A lot of what he went to the doctor for was a band-aid on the situation.
Yes.
Like, and actually those band-aids made the situation worse. He relied heavily on Adderall, which, I mean, I've taken in the past and it helped me, but like he was abusing it. And taking too much. It's just funny how those things are supposed to like help you, but they can so easily be abused to where like literally sends you on a spiral.
So you did mention you were in New Zealand when you first got off your birth control. And then you moved to Australia. Which you've also lived though in Italy, you've lived in the UK. So living in all these different places, what is your perspective on health and how it's taken and handled in these different countries versus here in the US.
Yes. Very different. Very different. So let's just start with food, right? So I know you traveled to Italy. You could eat the bread and the pasta and you weren't bloated, right?
Everything, even like drinking wine. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I could have wine and I didn't have a headache.
Yes.
And I was, eating all gluten and I wasn't leaving bloated. If I go to Olive Garden, I'm leaving feeling like miserable.
You're 6 months pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
It's so different.
It is. So the wheat overseas and mostly in Europe compared to the US or Australia, the wheat there has a much lower gluten content than the wheat that we have here in the US. So that's number one. But number two, we spray it a whole lot more with glyphosate, which is the herbicide in Roundup. So that also is impacting, I think, the effect that it has on our gut for sure. But even just in terms of food, okay, our animals don't lie, right? So in Australia, I fed my dogs a raw diet and they loved fruit and vegetables. Like, I am talking legit. Dusty, my boy, who is here with me in the US, he would just get like Cost lettuce, romaine lettuce, and he would just go eat it on his bed and literally like eat the whole thing, right?
Wow.
And that's like lettuce, right? But he would eat carrots, tomatoes, blueberries, everything. He would eat everything. Here, he will not touch it, even the organic stuff.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, that says that there is something up with our food here. And I don't know exactly what it is, but for sure, something's off.
That's shocking.
Because he won't eat it. Like, unless I mix it, with egg or whatever, he will not. I'm like, but it's blueberries. Like, you love
like
these. And he's
them.
like, he will sniff it and turn his nose. So there is something
That
with
is
our
like
food
the
here.
best test, though.
Oh,
because
sure.
animals, if they it's food. Like, if an animal turns away
Correct.
food,
Yes.
something's up.
For sure. So that was a big
Wow.
thing.
That's
and then,
eye-opening.
even just things like, I don't eat cereal, but when I came back to the US, I was like, let me just walk like all the aisles. And I know that sounds dumb, but I'm like, far out. The cereal aisle here is
The whole
ginormous. Like, what is that? That is not how it is overseas. It's like a few little cereals. It's not the same thing. And as I'm sure you've seen, like on social media, they'll compare even something junk like peanut butter, the Jif peanut butter here compared to Jif peanut butter in Europe. We have ingredients in ours that are not in the European ones, and there are ingredients that are banned over there, but okay here. So yeah, it's not good.
Well, so much more, too, is banned. And
Yes.
even in skincare, we were doing, like for my job, we were selling some skincare, and the founder of the skincare line, he had reached his 50s and he was seeing so many of his friends pass away of cancer.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
And he was looking at the ingredients list that were banned in the US versus what was banned in different countries, primarily European countries.
Yes.
And I think here there were like 14 banned ingredients for skincare.
Yeah.
And you have so many more in these other countries.
Yes.
And then we're just like sloshing all the chemicals onto our face. And we
Correct.
think we're anti-aging or preventative, but really causing so many more problems for ourselves down the line.
Agreed. That's a huge thing. And since World War II, there's been like 80,000 chemicals that have been introduced, and a small fraction of them have actually been tested. So just because something is on the shelf doesn't mean that it's FDA safe, which we know FDA is whatever,
Right.
They're
whatever.
high sus.
Right. Anyways, but just because it's on the shelf doesn't mean that it's safe for us to use. Most often, like, it's not even tested. So I think using apps like the Think Dirty app or the Environmental Working Group has Skin Deep. So you can go in and look at specific products on there and it will score it like 0 to 10 in terms of toxicity. So you can look at those, and if a particular brand isn't already in like the Think Dirty, then you can look at individual ingredients on the Skin Deep, and it again will score it from 0 to 10 in terms of toxicity. So you can choose a product that is actually going to be healthy for you.
Wow.
So recommend those apps for
Yes,
sure. They're
we
free.
definitely need to check out those apps.
It's really, it just like makes me more frustrated with like the federal government level. Because a lot of it is like, it boils down to like lobbying and like these huge industries like taking advantage of having deep pockets with politicians. And it's like, it's in our health, it's pharmaceuticals.
Well, and they're hand in hand, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But it's something to be aware of, like just talking about pharmaceuticals just quickly, is most medication is mimicked off of what came in nature, right? So they're looking at, okay, well, what would work in a natural setting? Well, now we'll just synthetically create that in the lab, so then they can make money off of it, right? Pretty much anything that there is a tablet for, prescription-wise, we can find a vitamin, a mineral, a herb, something alternative for that, right? Yeah. But you just can't really make money off that. So they want to make medication.
So we kind of talked about your physical health journey and how that corresponded to your mental health journey.
Yes.
As far as when you were really at the bottom, like in the low lows of your physical health.
Yes.
You were in the low lows of your mental health as well.
No, not yet. Not yet.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So I will say it was low. Like I felt low in terms of, is there really no hope? And that's why my tagline is there is hope and there is healing, because I was being told that there was no hope. You're just stuck with this. Like it is what it is. Right. So I do remember having days doing research where I was at the computer crying, but even then there wasn't depression, you know, and even like with my dad's suicide, there was a natural grieving process, but there wasn't depression. I never really had massive mental health stuff, but reflecting back, I can say I was a pessimist for sure. Like if something small happened, I was like, oh, there it goes again, you know what I mean? Yeah. Or I didn't laugh out loud a lot. And so when I kind of moved away from psychology and got more into like the natural health, I spent 2 years studying something called neuronutrient therapy. So how nutrition impacts mental health. And part of that was it's called amino acid therapy. So amino acids just make up protein food, but there are specific ones that work on your brain neurotransmitters. And again, I was never depressed and anxious or anything, but I was like, all right, I'm going to do this protocol. The very first day, and this is why I love amino acids, they work straight away, not like vitamins or minerals or herbs that can take 2 or 3 weeks to kind of kick in. I remember clear as day, I was chopping vegetables for dinner and my now ex-husband was in the shower and I was watching The Big Bang Theory and I was pissing myself laughing. And he came out of the shower and he's like, are you all right? I'm like, oh my God, this show is so funny.
He's like, I've never heard this before.
He literally said that. We had been together for like almost 7 years.
Oh my God.
And he's like, I've never heard you laugh like that. I'm like, but this show is so funny. And he's like, yeah, but we watch it all the time and you don't laugh like that. I'm like, I don't know, it's funny. And then I was like, oh, well, I took these tablets, that must be them. And I was like, wow, I had literally never really belly laughed before.
Wow.
Yes. And so my mental health wasn't bad, but it wasn't where it could be, right? And I think we need to be mindful of that in our health, that just because you feel okay and there's not necessarily something wrong, you could probably feel a whole lot better, right? Same thing in our spiritual health. Hey, you might be feeling good, but it can probably be next level, right?
Yes.
But my mental health, the first time I felt depression was when I was going through my whole divorce kind of process with my ex-husband. I just felt a lot of betrayal there. You know, that was obviously quite a massive thing to deal with, but worked through that and kind of got through that. And it was not until I moved back to the US, and I think it was a culmination of things. So again, even though I am American, I spent my adult life overseas. From 21 to 39, I was basically overseas, outside of a 6-month stint once and a 1-year stint another time. Right. The majority of my adult life was overseas. So it was a hard transition to come back, and I had to leave one of my dogs she was my heart. I still can't look at photos and videos of her without crying.
I think probably leaving her is harder than leaving the ex-husband.
For sure. Yeah, by that time. And my ex-husband is lovely. That was his issue, is that he was just so kind. He would give everyone the shirt off of his back, and it ended up crossing a line, right? I'm still in contact with him for the dogs and whatever. He's a lovely, lovely person. Yeah. But that part was hard for me. But moving back here, that transition, and I had different expectations of what I thought it would be like with my family. I was like, I'm moving back to the US and it's going to be great. And it was not what I was expecting. And that kind of really hurt me a lot as well. And then I went from having, a very successful 6-figure business to coming here and starting from scratch and finding really difficult financial situation where I'm like, wow, I've never experienced this in my life. And I moved out of my house when I was still in high school at 17, know? So I was like, this is just crazy. And then throw in the relationship that I was in. you know, the nice way to put it is toxic. The real way to put it is abusive, right? That was really hard for me. I'd never experienced anything. No man had ever even raised his voice to me, much less the things that I was dealing with, you know? And a lot of it was emotional and verbal abuse, but on a large scale. And it wasn't until I came out of that relationship fully, because, you know, with toxic relationships, you're back and forth and back and forth. And at his core, I know that he is a good person. I know that. I have forgiven him for everything. I hold zero hate in my heart for this man. In fact, I still have a lot of love and care for him. I pray for him all the time still. I've asked people to pray for him too, because I want the best in his life. But when I fully got out of that situation, I was able to actually process what I went through. Because when you're living in it, you're in fight or flight. You're in survival mode. Your brain cannot cope with everything that you are taking on.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got out, I was like, oh my gosh, I allowed this. And I give myself grace on that.
Yeah.
Because there was, you know, multifactorial as to why I carried on with that. But it was a lot for me to deal with. And then I also grieved the loss of his family as well. And that is something to this day. I'll probably get emotional. I still grieve them. He has a beautiful family. Everything that I would want in his family or in a family was his family. Yeah. And I grieve that a lot, you know, to this day. I want to text his mom and his sister and those sorts of things. So I think it was culmination, but it was dark, my friends. When I say it was dark, I had never thought about taking my life before. And it wasn't where I wanted to, but I was literally in my car screaming and crying to God. And this was probably like May, June last year, just screaming. And Dusty's in the back, like freaking out, because I couldn't hold it in. I would scream and just saying, God, take me out. I'm done. Take me and Dusty out at the same time, because I will never leave him, but I don't want this life anymore. I was like, I'm tapping out, God. I'm so ready to be done. I don't want this life anymore. I don't want it. And there was a point where I was walking him and I literally Googled, what pills do people take to kill themselves? I didn't wait for the answer to come up, and I was like, we're not doing that. And I closed that out. But that's where it was dark. It was like, wow, I was so ready to fall asleep and not wake up, right? And I would say that that was my low, but there was a lead in through that relationship where, you know, when you are living in that survival mode, I had never experienced anxiety before, ever. And I was living it, and I was like, oh my gosh, always having that pit in your stomach, not being able to sleep. Friends, my head hits the pillow. I'm out in 10 seconds and I sleep through the night unless I have to pop to the toilet, you know? But that was not the case for that time. And I really think, again, reflecting back, the Holy Spirit was like, I'm going to cause you anxiety. I'm going to cause you to feel all of this stuff, because this is not where you are supposed to be. You're not supposed to be in here, even though I desired it so bad. I was like, I want it to be him, you know? Yeah. But it wasn't, right? But even in that time, again, I had never... 2 times in my life I had experienced panic attacks before that. One was Hurricane Katrina. We were flying through it and like literally looking out, black clouds, lightning. The plane was all over the place. We had to emergency land, and the pilot told us in his 25 years of flying that was his worst flight ever. Wow. So I had a panic attack then. Oh, sure. And I warranted.
As any person probably knows people on that.
It was very scary. Jeez. And then the day after I moved back to the US, and I really realized, oh my gosh, I left my dog. And she's still alive. It was like a 4-hour panic attack. It was full on. But outside of that, and again, I think those are real reasons, I hadn't experienced that. But in that relationship, I was having panic attacks all the time. And in moments where there was onslaughts from the person, hours of interrogation and verbal and emotional abuse that I couldn't leave the situation, I would self-harm right in front of the person, because I was like, emotionally, I can't take it anymore. So, you know, one day I had my keys and I cut up my legs, like with my keys, because I was like, I can't deal with the emotions anymore. So this time in the US for me has been so hard, so difficult, but God got me through. And this is where I look back and I say, my relationship with God is the best that it's been in my entire life. So how can I be upset? Right? I've learned a lot, I've grown a lot, and I'm sad that I went through those things, and I'm sad when I reflect back and really understand that the Holy Spirit lives in me, and He lives in you, and He lives in you. When you really grasp that concept, you want to take care of yourself, because you're taking care of Jesus. You're taking care of God. And my heart still gets sad where I have repented and I've said, I'm so sorry, God. I'm so sorry that I didn't take care of myself and set boundaries. Your spirit was hurting and I allowed that, you know? And I know that God has forgiven me, but it's just such a change in your mindset.
Oh my
you know,
gosh,
when you
yeah.
go through that, where you're like, wow. And I take that now, even in terms of my own health. I've been healthy for such a long time. I've had to heal, right? But now as I've written this course, I'm understanding so many things just from a different level. And it's like, wow, I want to eat even better. I want to make sure I'm resting even more. Like, I want the Holy Spirit to have like the best temple that he can have on all fronts, right? And so, yeah, I now can empathize with people who see me who have mental health stuff going on, because I walked it. And it is only by the grace of God and Church of Whitestone that I've walked through the other side, because otherwise I wouldn't be here.
It's dark.
Yes.
I've been there myself, and I've lived through that myself. And
yes.
I didn't know about your, moment of wanting to.
Yes. Yeah.
That's really hard, and I
Yeah.
can relate to that. I've had a lot of moments like that myself, but it was in moments where I was in situations I wasn't supposed to be in.
Right.
And the way you put that resonates with me. Like, the Holy Spirit was like kind of showing you, like, hey,
loud and clear.
You're not supposed to be feeling like this.
Yes.
This is wrong. And like,
Yes.
now that I look back, as you were saying that, I was thinking in my head, I was just like, all those like years of living in like what I tell you is debilitating anxiety and depression. Like,
Yes.
debilitating.
Yes.
And I didn't go into a job one time because I had such a panic attack the night before that I was just telling myself I can't walk through those doors. I can't do it. And I don't know, that just really resonated with me, and I'm grateful that you shared that.
Yeah, and thank you too. And I think it's important for us to talk about, right?
Yeah.
I'm a very open book, I feel like, even on social media, but I will say this is the first time that I have started to share that publicly. A, I didn't feel called to it beforehand, but B, also protecting, my ex or whatever. I don't think anyone who watches this would even have a clue who he is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it's fine. But I think we have to share, because now people are like, wow, Jen, you're always smiling and you always have joy.
Yes.
And I feel that, right? But that is something that we are taught, that joy is different from happiness. When you have the Holy Spirit and you have that relationship with God, you can feel joy even in the hard times, right?
It's like underlying all the time.
Yes, correct. And feelings are not mutually exclusive. I think we get into black and white thinking, but you can be sad about things and happy at the same time, right? So, for example, moving from Australia, that was very exciting, but it was also very sad at the same time.
Sure.
So we have to understand that your feelings are not mutually exclusive. We can feel them all, but get the joy from the Lord, because it's so different. It is so
literally
different.
sustain you. Like,
Yes.
What you're going to lean on.
it's literally
Yes.
what, and it's what I think that's the biggest change that I've noticed in myself is like, I was kind of like you, a very pessimistic person, and kind of just saw the negative in a lot of things.
Yes.
And the joy is one of the characteristics of myself that I have noticed since accepting Jesus back into my heart. And
Yes.
I have a person that I went to high school with who knows Joseph from church.
Yes.
And we were just talking, and this person just happened to say, he's like, yeah, Joseph said that you have just like a jovial spirit.
Yes.
And I was just like, I have never in my life been described as that. Ever.
But you just don't know it.
Yeah.
Probably.
We know you as this person, this Alexis, who is just smiling and laughing and joyful.
Yeah.
Like,
And
I cannot picture you the other way. I just
think
can't.
maybe I was before, but like different undertones.
Sure.
Right? And for different reasons. A lot of it was masked.
Yeah.
And I forced myself to feel that way for a really long time.
Yeah.
Which is why this time around, like this past year, all the joy is authentic.
Yes.
And it
yes.
just like that's when it exudes off of you, and that's when people can see it, because even when we were saying in the valleys,
Yes.
you still find a reason to be joyful,
Yes.
And to keep going.
and to keep going.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we are not supposed to make camp there. I went to something on Sunday, and I loved the way that the speaker said it. She's like, we are supposed to walk through the valley, not pitch your tent there, hang out there and stay stuck there. We are to walk through it, and God is going to walk through with us. Don't hang out in the
really
valley.
good.
I'm like,
Yeah, I love
that.
that.
Yes, because we can wallow, right?
Well, speaking
human.
of that,
We're allowed a little wallow. A little wallow.
like we're all these emotions, like you said, are not exclusive. Like, we're human beings.
Correct.
Our nature one is to sin, but also our nature is to lean on our own understanding.
Yes.
Try to revert back.
Yeah, and I think the course correct is important, right?
Yes, yeah.
In your focus. But speaking of this past weekend, did you want to get into how exciting, like,
my little God wink?
Yeah,
absolutely. When I was living overseas, did a lot of public speaking from an educational perspective. I like that perspective. I am not Miss Lauren, where she can jump on stage and just have this great personality. I can educate, and I love that space. I really love that space. But since I've been back in the US, I've not had any of those opportunities. And I literally Tuesday last week, I was walking my dog and just having a little chat with God. And I was like, all right, God, I would really love for that door to open. I just want to have a platform, not for my name, but to glorify you and help as many people as possible. I love doing one-on-ones and I will always continue to do them, but I want to reach more people. So I was like, let me, open the door for something. And literally the next morning, a woman who I had met one time last summer reached out and said, hey, I'm hosting a panel at South by for mental health and social media. Do you want to be on the panel? And I was like, yeah. And that is so God. Okay, God wink. And then obviously now being here with you guys, like, although this was planned beforehand, it's still in that time frame, right? It's all in God's time.
It is. Well, and you emailed and said, is it going to come out on the 14th?
Yes.
And I had no idea that your course was launching on the 17th.
Yes.
So that following Monday.
Specific date.
Yep.
So I knew it was coming up, but when you said that, I was like, oh, wow.
It just worked out perfect.
Is really working out right now.
Yes.
And just kind of pivoting back slightly, because maybe we shouldn't wallow, but I do think there's that mourning process.
For sure.
And we've kind of talked about that a little bit when you talked about your ex's family. And it's like, when you're in a relationship with someone and you get to know their family, they become your family.
Your family,
and you're even like a pet, like you're just, you're mourning all these different aspects. And I think we have to give ourselves grace on that, to allow ourselves to mourn it and feel it, because if we just jump out of it and we bounce back and we start, keeping our schedule super busy or doing this and that, then we don't feel it.
Yes.
And I know even just these past couple of months with me, like I've kind of jumped into the podcast and things, and then I've had times where I call Alexis or voice memo her and I'm just can't breathe crying because I just like spent a month in like 90 miles an hour instead of letting myself like mourn it a little bit.
Yes.
And you have to, or I think it will just come down on you in one moment. You like have to have that little grieving mourning time.
Agreed.
Whether it's like, it might be the person, and also though all of those other elements.
All the other things. Yes. Thank you for pointing that out. That we are supposed to lament. We are supposed to grieve. That is part of the process. We just can't stay there forever.
Right. That's part of the healing. And as you were talking about, I'm thinking it's kind of like God led you, because we were talking about at one point, non-Christians will ask, I feel like the most popular question is, well, why does God let bad things happen to good people?
Right.
Like if God loves you, how would he let bad things happen? And when I'm hearing your story, and I didn't know majority of that, because you do radiate joy, and you're just like, you stand very tall, and you just have this happiness,
confidence,
and you walk shoulders back in great posture, and I can't even describe it. It is like sunshine radiating off of you.
Agreed.
Thank you.
But it's like God led you through that so that you could fulfill this calling on your life in a full way, because now you know the mental health and the physical health, and you know the spiritual side, like you know every side of it, and you didn't fully know the mental health side because you hadn't gone through it
myself.
And now like when people come to you, you know how those two interact, like you've been through both of them, and so there's a purpose in the pain.
For
like there's
sure.
a purpose in what God allows us to endure.
Correct. And again, he works all things out for your good, right? For those that love him.
So
yes.
True.
Yes. I look back at, before everything else happened with my ex-husband through till now, when it was just my health journey, I reflected back on that, and I was like, man, that was, at that point, the hardest 2 years of my life. But I was like, it's also my greatest blessing, because it put me on the path that I'm now. Otherwise, I'd be doing psychology. And this is something I really want to reiterate. I think it is important to have talk therapy. I do think that there is a place for counseling and therapy and that sort of thing. Absolutely. I wouldn't have studied psychology if I didn't think so.
Right.
However, and this is one of the little myths I like to put to bed, is that you cannot talk away a physiological issue. You can't, right? And most of our mental health stuff is rooted in our physiology. And so when people come to me for, let's just say, anxiety or depression, I'm going to look at their thyroid function. What are your cortisol levels? Where is your sex hormone levels? Where are your sex hormone levels? What's your gut health like? Is there inflammation? Because depression and anxiety are in part inflammatory conditions. Do you have nutrient deficiencies? Because sometimes it's as simple as, okay, you need more zinc and vitamin B6 and you're going to feel great. Do you know what I mean? So I look at it all from physiology. But then if we've lived a life for so long where we do, let's say, have automatic negative thoughts, we do also then have to retrain the way that we think. And so I think therapy can be very useful, or again, just talking to someone that maybe you don't feel comfortable sharing all of the nitty gritty. There is a safe space to do that, and they can help you refrain some of that. So I do think that is important, but I really think physiology is where it's at. And so my mental health stuff, yes, there was trauma for sure in what I was going through, but also when you're living in fight or flight, okay, of course you're going to feel anxious because your cortisol's through the roof. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of course, right? So it's kind of a chicken and an egg situation, but it's
like all interconnected.
correct. And that's why I like, from a naturopathic perspective, we treat all of that. It's a holistic view. And now adding in that spiritual element, it just takes it to a whole different level.
It does. It gives it a foundation.
Yes.
The ultimate foundation that then all of that can be built on.
And that's something else from where I was saying on Sunday. This one was talking about walking through the valley, but also people say they hit rock bottom and we think that's the worst. And she's like, but what if your rock bottom is the firm foundation? And it's like, yes. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, I like that too.
Because, and this is something I see that in my own life. And when everything started to go really bad, you know, with my ex-boyfriend, this is like end of 2022, one of my Christian friends in Australia, we would voice text a lot because I didn't know anyone here, and voice text in tears or you can't breathe. I get that, you know, and she was like, look, the Holy Spirit has really put it on me, telling me to tell you, God is going to decimate, that was the word that she used, to decimate your life so he can rebuild it the way that he wants to. Look at where I'm rebuilt.
Yeah.
You know, and that's to his glory, and that is amazing, and that is why we have to share our testimonies.
He built it back even better.
Even better.
So obviously all of that kind of goes into what prompted you to design this course, The Healthy Living from a Christian Perspective. What really did you feel like prompted that, or was it just like a pulling?
Amanda Boddicker, well, now Amanda Banks, at church. So I met with her end of the year, I think around August, end of summer last year. And I was we just went to lunch, just to have lunch. It was like 3 hours. And then at the end, she was like, what do you do? And I kind of explained to her, and she's like, ooh, I would love for you to come talk to my students at DTS and maybe to some women at these churches and different things. And she's like, but there has to be a biblical element. And I was like, okay, I got to research. Yes, I love that, but let me research. So kind of the seed got planted then. And then I was working with someone one-on-one from church. I won't say who, but she was like, all right, Jen, I'm loving all of this, but can we add the spiritual element in a little bit? And I was like, okay, all right. And then
wait, I really got to do this research now.
And so it was kind of the end of the year last year, like December, I was like, all right, in the new year, I'm going to write this program. God wants me to do that. You know, I always had 7 pillars of health. And then I was like, now we're going to have 8, and that's spiritual health in there. And so, it was really just other people prompting. And again, that's obviously coming from God, right? So it was just from that saying, okay, that's the missing piece of the puzzle. And I saw that in my own life. So it's, of course now I want to share that with everyone, you know? And it's so cool, like writing it, because again, I'm a big researcher, big nerd. It is so cool having the Bible as my reference book. I'm like,
cool?
This is so bonkers, but I love it. You know, it's very cool. It's very cool.
It into your work. So as you were doing all your research, what were some of your one or a few of your favorite Bible verses that you felt like connected to living a healthy lifestyle?
Yes.
Because I think it's so interesting when I was going on your website, reading them, I was like, oh, yeah. Like it's kind of, God's pretty direct with what he tells us. If we're just
paying attention,
willing to listen and like have our eyes open to it, then it's like, oh yeah.
Yes.
He's telling us that.
I have 2 main ones. So the first one is 1 Corinthians 10:31. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it for the glory of God. And it's like, okay, yes, what we eat and what we drink and whatever we are doing. And so that can come down to sleep, stress management, setting healthy boundaries, saying no, moving your body. All of those things is to glorify God, right? And part of that too, kind of like what I really want to do is help Christians become as healthy as they can so they can do kingdom work, right? Because if we're not healthy, we can't go do the things that God wants us to do.
Well, it ties into like, if you don't love yourself, how can you love other people?
You can't.
Right?
Correct. So yeah, I just feel like the enemy really wants to keep us stuck in our physical and mental health issues. So it affects our relationship with God, right? Because oftentimes we blame him. Why am I like this? And why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? But it affects our relationships with others. But also, if you don't have the physical or mental capacity to do his kingdom work, great. That's exactly what the devil wants, right? It's exactly what he wants. So
stop you in any way he can.
Yeah. So I think just, again, looking at, he specifically says, whether you eat or drink. So, hey, let's look at our diet, our nutrition, and then whatever you do it for the glory of God. So it's like, okay, for me, that just really prompted me. Let's look at this as a spiritual thing. And then the second one was Romans 12:1. It says, and so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because all he has done for you. Let them be a living sacrifice, the kind that he will find acceptable. This is the way that we worship him. So for me, I take that and I say, caring for your body is an act of worship to God, right? Yeah. Our bodies are made to worship him. Our bodies are not made to be worshiped. So it's not about vanity. It's not about what you look like, because God doesn't care. He doesn't care what you look like, but he certainly cares how you take care of his temple, right?
That's so.
And so I think we have to start thinking that way of everything that I do is to worship him, and me caring for myself, whatever that looks like, is actually worshiping him. Because we often think worship is just singing our songs, which you guys know I love worship. I love that. But it's like, no, worship isn't just Sundays or jamming out at your house. It's everything. Everything we do in our life can be a form of worship. And it's like, wow, for me, that's exciting. I was like,
exciting.
Ooh, yay, another thing I get to do for God, because he does so much for us that it's like, okay, let's focus on this. And again, it's not, I want to take yes, I think we need to be healthy, but I want to take out the vanity side of it.
Yeah.
I just want to lose weight. That's such a fleeting thing of, okay, cool. The temptation of that cookie or brownie or whatever is right here. I'll start on Monday. It's all right. Oh, the holidays are coming up. I'll start after the holidays. Oh, I've got a wedding in 6 months. I don't really have to start till a month before that, right? It's always the next thing. Like, it's not a strong enough factor. So for me, as a Christian, we're always looking of how can we be obedient to God? Okay, well, he tells us we need to care for ourselves. So that is being obedient. It's a form of worship. So caring for yourself and being healthy, A, in obedience and worship, but then B, to actually do kingdom work and glorify him and save some souls. That should be our motivation.
You need to be at like full capacity.
Correct.
For me, that speaks on the level of like laziness, because I have a history of being like a couch potato and like being very lazy. And it wasn't until I gave up certain things in my life that I started to become more productive. And I was like, and that just coincided with us starting this podcast. But it's like, if I were to be left to my own devices and indulging in certain things that caused laziness, I would be stuck in that rut, and I would have never been able to get out of it. But because am starting to walk in obedience and started to give things up, and my relationship with Jesus has deepened, those fall to the wayside, and then that literally removes a hindrance to becoming obedient and to becoming and to take care of yourself, because laziness comes with all kinds of negative factors. And for me, I've noticed a huge difference. Like, previously I would come home, take care of my dog, and sit on my couch for the rest of the night. And now we have so much to do, and I thank God for it. Truly, what I've been telling people is, they're like, how are you? I'm like, I'm busy, but in a good way. Like, in a good way. Like, I am up on my feet. I don't sit down on my couch until I've swept my floors, sat outside with the dog, actually sitting out there with him.
Yes.
Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'll leave the door open. But as I'm cleaning my floors or picking up or doing my dishes and like cooking dinner, then I'll sit down. And most of the time, I'm working on an outline or I'm working on the podcast. But I'm no longer sitting there what feels like wasting my time staring at a TV screen or my phone.
Yep.
Right? Like,
yeah. So and then having intentional rest, because we do still need to rest. That is biblical as well, right? And that is part of the course. Yes. I mean, Jesus went and rested, right?
Yes, he did.
Then Sabbath, we are supposed to take a rest. We are supposed to have that. It is biblical as well.
Well, isn't there, I don't know if it's a Bible verse or just more of a concept that like if you're too busy to like pray or read your Bible, then you're busier than God intended for you to be.
I love that.
You know, I've seen that constantly.
Yep.
And can I share God Week
of course.
as well? Because
it
kind of ties into this. Most people, maybe not most people, but I've shared that like my job is really intensive. Just the legal field in general is hard and requires a lot of hours. And one of my biggest fears leading up to starting this podcast was how was I going to balance the two?
Yes.
And not to say that there aren't going to be busy days where I do have to stay late. That just comes with the field of work I'm in. You guys, today, I was just like, I can't believe that I have been leaving work at 5:30 every single day.
Yes. Love that.
And it's like all of these fears that I had in my head. I'm like, how can I make room for this? How is this going to work out? And am I going to lose my job because I'm slacking here? Or is the podcast going to slack because I can't make it in time? All that to say is God.
He makes a way.
He makes a way. And I don't even have to, I shouldn't even be worrying about, am I going to make it through? Like, He literally has made a way.
Yeah.
Every single day.
So amazing.
And like, again, not to say that there aren't going to be times where...
Sure, but that's not your life.
That's not... Yeah.
Yes.
And that just kind of ties into the, if you're busier, if you're too busy to do all these things and you're busier than God intended you to be. And I'm just like, look at him. Look at him.
Yeah. You even voicemailed me yesterday because I was like, okay, it's Monday. This is normally when you get a good idea of how busy your week will be. And you're like,
it's a good day.
It's not. Like, it's not that, like...
Yeah, and last year was a struggle for me at work. Like, just negative, all these negative things. And I don't know, like something about stepping into this new year with a purpose.
Well, and doing it for His glory, which brings us back to your course. When you add the 8th pillar of you're doing it for Him, it takes out the vanity part. It takes out the pride part.
Yes.
It takes out all of that. Even just talking about speaking at church and things, and you know, if people get nervous or anxious about it, our pastor's telling us when you take out it being about you and you make it all about being about God, there's no anxiety about it. Because it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with what you look like, or it's just about Him. It's just about glorifying Him. So it takes out that self element when you're doing it for God. So to wrap up on the course, what should people expect from the course if they decide to jump on board? Because we do have a coupon code. We'll share that. But if they want to get in on it, what can they expect from it?
So it's self-paced. It is online. 6-week module, or 6-week course, sorry. One module is dropped every week. And so week 1, we're setting a firm foundation, talking about things like honoring God with your body, but also some practical things like what are the obstacles that you're going to face and how can we overcome them? So we set that firm foundation. Week 2 is all about nutrition. Your food matters. So I will be talking about healthy eating in general, what I believe healthy eating really actually looks like, but then adding in that biblical element, right? And then even just in terms of like praying over your food. I'm guilty of not doing that. I'm not going to lie. That's just something that I'm not good at. But it's like, well, now we're thanking God. These are just important things. So I kind of go through the why of those things. Then the next week, we're talking all about exercise. So again, I bring in some of my personal training stuff in there, how to actually move to support your body, because F45 is not where it's at. I explain the why behind all of this stuff. And then again, bringing God into it. How is that honoring God? How is that taking care of your temple? But then giving them like a fun playlist, because I know a lot of people still listen to, you know, conventional music when they work out because they're like, I can't really get up to. So giving them different playlists, but Christian music, you know, bringing God in there. Week 4 is all about stress management. So a lot of that, again, is normal sort of things, but godly friendships. That's a huge thing where we're going to be spending one lesson just on godly friendships, because as we experience them, there's something different. It is so different. Hey, so talking about that, setting boundaries,
when you
it
find those friendships.
And as women, I find that a very strange thing, you know, to have women friends who legit care about you and are not trying to like one up you or stab you in the back. Yes, who actually want to uplift you. It's like, what is this? This is amazing.
It can need some time to get used to, if I'm being honest.
Yes.
I'm just like waiting for like the other shoe to
drop.
And I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but sometimes I do kind of hold people at bay. But it's because I've had traumatic relationships in the past with other females, and it's not fun.
Correct.
We've talked about that because we had our, I think when our stress hit a certain level, we had a little freak out between the two of us.
Right.
And then we both ended up like tears, because then we were more freaked out about the freak out, because I think
it scared us.
Yeah, Lex
that
voice
like
memo
maybe
me.
your friendship would.
Yeah, Lex had been like, you know, in past friendships, this would have ended it. And it was like, yeah, if it wasn't based in faith, that could have ended a friendship. But it's just a different level where it's just like, okay, we had this, we got past it, we talked it through, and we came out the other side.
The Holy Spirit was at work in me, because I got a fire in me. Fire. Sometimes things explode. Yeah,
it burns. Yeah.
So the Holy Spirit definitely had worked inside of me, and that's a testament.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To how important
godly friendships are.
And he's softening you, and
Yes.
and you can be softer when you have friendships like this. You don't have to have your walls up as much.
And that goes with intimate relationships too, between a male and a female.
Yes. Yeah. You know? Agreed. Yes. So stress management. Then week 5, we're talking all things mental health. So again, mental health from that physiological perspective, but then bringing in God as well. And then week 7 is low tox living. So bringing in, and that's a harder aspect to kind of bring the biblical part in, you know, because God doesn't say, don't use toxic products, right? but you got to start thinking about, okay, well, if we are our body is a gift, we are to steward it well. Yes. Well, that also means we have to be mindful of the things that we are using if we know that they can be harmful. And for people who have us, we have our dogs. Those are our kids. That's still a gift from God. They are our babies. We are responsible for them. Yeah. Dogs absorb everything in their paw pads. So if we're using toxic stuff on the floor, that's getting absorbed into them. But same thing for kids, you know?
Sure.
We got thrown human kids in there, right? Yeah. Their little feet absorb everything, or if they're, you know, putting something in their mouth and you cleaned it with Lysol, like that's not a great thing. So gatekeeping your home to support your body and care for the people and animals that God has, the beings that God has entrusted to you. We have a Facebook group, so you have lifetime access to all of the content and lifetime access to the Facebook group as well. You get one-on-one appointment with me, just 15 minutes, so I can tailor your supplement plan specific to you and your needs. Yeah, I think it's going to be amazing. I'm not going to lie. I really do.
Describing through the different weeks, I'm like,
and it's cheap. Like, to be honest, because this is something, again, God really spoke to me and was like, you need to make this affordable for people. And so I could have skimped on the content, because the first program I ever wrote, it's called The Healthy Hormone Method, was 60 lessons and like 15 and a half hours of content. And yes, you got like group coaching every week and whatever, but it's $1,500. That's out of reach for a lot of people. And so I have a different course as well that was cheaper, like $500. But even with this, I just kept hearing like $297. That's doable for people. I feel like, you know, and there's a payment plan if you want to split it into 3 months as well. But it's still what's on my wall, because I have like post-its for each lesson.
I remember you posting that story. I was like, look at our girl.
It's like 42 lessons still. Wow. It's like, it's still, you're getting so much content and value. Like just the lesson around what foods to include. It's 15 pages of notes for me. So that's probably going to end up being like 45 minutes or an hour just on what to include there. And that's one lesson, right? So it's very comprehensive. And that's why I say you have lifetime access, because you're probably not going to get through it all in 6 weeks, but you can always go back and revisit, right? So you implement a couple things the first go around. Great. Those are habits now. You go back and implement something else because it is progress, not perfection.
Right.
No one's going to do this perfect, right? But I'm excited about it. I really am. I just feel like, again, me just writing it, I've grown so much that it's like, okay. And it's the Holy Spirit is really writing a lot of it for me, right?
Well, that's one thing that I've noticed is I remember when you first brought this up.
Yes.
And I was like, oh yeah, this is good.
Yes.
And I've just watched you on your stories, and I've just watched you progress. And there is something too, and the Holy Spirit is behind something. It just launches.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like it was that long ago that you decided to do this.
No, I really only started writing it 3-4 weeks ago. You know what I mean? Yeah.
There's something that I've noticed and stood out to me is when something is God ordained, it flows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like a chore. It's like, because I actually hate writing, not gonna lie. I hate it, like loathe it. But I've really been enjoying this process. So yeah.
And you're learning along the way too.
Exactly.
So it's like a whole,
learning and growing and lighting that fire in me. So yeah, I'm excited.
And then we'll wrap it up, but before we do, we can do these kind of quick form.
Yeah.
But I wanted to end with kind of action steps, things people can implement and do in their lives.
Yes.
So first off, any like hot takes or myths about health that you can share?
Okay, one I know people talk about, and you asked the question too, is being vegan or vegetarian healthier? No. Definitely not. So first I will say why from a physiological perspective, and then I'm going to tie in a Bible verse in there. Or I'll read the Bible verse first, actually. So Genesis 9:2-4. So it says, all the animals of the earth, all the birds of the sky, all the small animals that scurry along the ground, all the fish in the sea will look on you with fear and terror. I have placed them in your power. I have given them to you for food, just as I have given you grain and vegetables, but you must never eat any meat that still has the lifeblood in it. So God literally says, eat the meat. He literally says it.
That was actually like, I had added on like red meat, the whole red meat debate, because like there's some people out there who say that like red meat is bad for you.
No.
And I've always felt that like, that doesn't seem right. But okay, well that's that.
Because people, I'll come back to red meat specifically in a second. But so with the meat perspective, God tells us that is there for us to eat, right? All of it. So eat it, right? And I'm a huge advocate for it. And it's funny because so many people, they know how much I love my dogs. They're like, oh, you must be vegan. I'm like, no, mate. Give me a medium rare steak any day of the week. You know what I mean? But because God knows what he is doing, right? So in animal protein, it has all of the amino acids. So as I was saying before, amino acids, there are specific amino acids that build specific neurotransmitters in your brain. So when I'm talking about neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine and the endorphins and these sorts of things that impact your mood and your appetite, but we have to have the amino acids to actually fill those levels, to build those, right? Animal protein has all of them. So you know whether you're eating chicken, pork, turkey, kangaroo, whatever you're eating, you're going to get those amino acids into you. Vegan and vegetarian sources do not have the complete profile. Hemp seeds, yes, but if we're talking like legumes, so chickpeas or lentils or whatever, they will have some amino acids, but not all of them. And so I will tell you, the vegan and vegetarian clients that I have worked with through the years, they are the ones that have eating disorders, that are super anxious, super depressed, because they are not getting the nutrients that they need to feed those feel-good neurotransmitters in their brain. So I definitely don't think that is, from that mental health component, vegan or vegetarian sources are great. The other thing too is that so many of us women are dealing with hormone issues. And so a legume is 2/3 carbohydrate and only 1/3 protein. So you're not actually getting a lot of protein, but you're getting a lot of carbs. And carbs are not the enemy. That is not what I'm saying, guys. But you need them from healthy sources, and that could be in there. But if you're very carb heavy, your blood sugar is going to go on a roller coaster. And blood sugar, or balanced blood sugar, is the foundation of your hormone health. So I definitely say eat the meat. Okay. And going back to red meat, people worry about cholesterol. That's really what they say.
Is that where that comes from? Okay.
but that's a healthy form of cholesterol. We have to have HDL, which is the quote unquote good cholesterol. It is protective cholesterol. It protects your heart, your brain. We have to have cholesterol to make sex hormones. Like, that is a good fat. Right. So it's more the unhealthy, your chips and your fries and the deep fried foods. That's the stuff that's going to jack up your cholesterol, and the refined carbohydrates. So there's a little saying in the naturopathic world, don't blame the butter for what the bread did.
I was just about to talk about butter.
Yes.
Okay.
So butter is a healthy fat. It is great for you. As long as you tolerate dairy, it's not a problem, you know? And even if you don't, then I say just use ghee, because it takes out the allergens and it's just the milk fat. So that's a great healthy thing for our hormones and for our brain, for sure.
Lex was mentioning it, kind of the cost sometimes of living a healthier lifestyle.
Yes.
And one, it can be overwhelming, and two, unfortunately, it kind of is just sometimes seems like
overwhelming.
In our country, it's really can be expensive. It can seem like the healthy alternatives cost so much more than the traditional item that we would think to get. And so what are, I guess, 3 easy action steps or 3 little transitions that people can take? Like they can start tomorrow. That will jumpstart this process to living a healthier lifestyle.
So you don't have to only eat organic. So when it comes to like your meat, not your meat, but to your vegetables and your fruit, you don't have to eat everything organic. Just go onto Google and search out the dirty dozen. Those are the things that are most heavily sprayed with pesticides, herbicides, and insecticides. So yes, if you can't afford to, eat those things organic, but they also have a clean 15 list. So any of those things, I'm not so worried about you eating organic or not. So that will save you money there. Anything that has like a peel or a shell or whatever, that you're not consuming. So like an apple has, you know, the skin, which you're probably going to eat, but a banana or an avocado, you're not eating that outside. So you don't really have to worry so much again about getting those things organic either. Is organic going to be better? Sure. But again, it's not the be all end all, because again, healthy living can become an idol. I really believe that, but also sometimes you just can't afford it. And I get that. So you can get, you know, cheap fruit and veggie soak, or even just, again, Google fruit and veggie soak, like DIY. It's like a little bit of vinegar and some water. You soak everything in there and then you rinse it out, and it doesn't taste like vinegar, and that gets rid of all that stuff. So that's an easy thing.
Yeah, that's a great hack.
Also then going to kind of that whole grass-fed and finished and free-range pork and eggs and chicken, and again, are those things going to be better? Sure, but it's not the be-all end-all. So if you are getting meat, just try to get the leanest one. So you can still get, you know, just minced meat, you know, like ground beef or something. Just get the lean version of it rather than the full fat, because it's the fat that will keep the hormones in there if they had been exposed.
Okay,
so
that's a good one too.
Yeah, it is.
Yay!
These are some good tricks.
And then I would say probably ditch some of the pre-packaged foods. So like you can get, and I love them, like Simple Mills has almond flour crackers, or the Humble Seed Co. I really like their seed crackers, but you know, they're $5-6 for a box of them. So instead of eating a pre-packaged sort of thing, think, okay, well, what would be a healthy replacement? Just get some nuts or some seeds, you know, from a little bins or a little packet. And that's a lot cheaper to just eat something like that rather than a pre-packaged, pre-done sort of thing.
Okay, perfect. Those are great.
Yay.
And then for our younger viewers, what advice would you give to kind of your teen through maybe early 20s self in regards to health?
A lot.
Or like
Off the pill. Get off the pill for sure, because it was just masking. I really believe that I would have had a PCOS diagnosis a lot earlier had I not been on the pill, because the pill is a fake period. It is not your real period. It is just a withdrawal bleed. So your sugar pills, you're no longer giving yourself hormones, and so therefore you bleed. But it is not a real period. So it's masking whatever hormone issue you've got going on, or potentially have going on. So definitely I'd say get off the pill. Stop using perfume, right? As I said, that's the big one. The HIIT training, so that high intensity F45, that sort of thing, because exercise is beautiful and it's great and we all should do it every single day, but it can be a stressor depending on frequency, intensity, and duration. And so stress in any form is not healthy. And so for me, I think a lot of why my periods were so painful and heavy is not a PCOS thing. So I also have something called adenomyosis, but I didn't find that out until I was 38, when I was like, hey, I check my hormones every year to make sure I'm where they should be, adjust my supplements, whatever. And like, okay, but everything is exactly where it needs to be, and my periods are still more heavy and painful than what they should be. So I went, and this is where in Australia it's different. I just went into the doctor and I was like, I want an ultrasound. Because I said, I think I either have endometriosis, uterine fibroids, or adenomyosis. And straight away they looked and they're like, oh yeah, you've got adenomyosis. So basically what that is with endometriosis, you know, we've got our normal, let's say this is your uterus. Inside we've got our normal endometrial tissue. Endometriosis is where that's growing outside as well, whether that's on your uterus or your bowel or whatever. With adenomyosis, I have my normal uterine lining, but I have a second one. So there's a second one that grows in the actual lining of your uterus. So every month I grow and shed 2 uterine linings. There's nothing, that's probably a genetic thing, because the only other causes behind that is like a C-section or something where some of the cells actually implanted into the wall. So it's something that I'll have until I hit menopause. But majority of people who have this and go to the doctor, they're told, get a hysterectomy.
Oh, wow.
Legit. I won't say who, but there's someone in my family that had that done, early 40s, because that's what the doctor said to do. So that was also my treatment. Oh, if you don't want to have heavy, painful periods, either go back on the pill or have a hysterectomy. And I'm like, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I no longer flood. I've had very embarrassing things, like literally sitting in the middle of a cafe and getting up to go to the bathroom and blood is like dripping down my leg, you know, or sitting front and center in the classroom and look down and there's a puddle of blood underneath my chair. Like, I've had some really embarrassing moments. Yeah. I don't flood like that anymore, but I have 2 uterine linings. They're always it's gonna be heavier, right? Mm-hmm. But it's managed naturally. So I think part of that is, again, with that HIIT training, if you're exercising a lot, your cortisol levels go up. The higher your cortisol, your body is saying, I'm in fight or flight mode, so now is not the time to make babies. So let's decrease the natural production of progesterone, because progesterone is progestation, right? Okay. And so that throws that out of whack. But progesterone and estrogen have to be in a really beautiful balance. And if they're not, your body perceives itself as estrogen dominant. Even if your estrogen is normal of where it should be, if your progesterone is too low in comparison, you're estrogen dominant. Adenomyosis is an estrogen dominant condition. So I feel like if I got rid of a lot of that HIIT training and sprints and running, and sprints I think are okay here and there, but that F45 I think is actually damaging us.
Is that what CrossFit is?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's a no.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
Like the really high intensity style.
Yes, correct. Okay. It can do a lot more damage than good in the long term.
Sure.
In the long term. Don't work so hard. That's another thing, right? You know,
Yeah.
I went to school and worked full time for over a decade. And I think that really led to my big crash, 26, 27. And then I think a lot of us can relate to this. Maybe not you, because I've heard your testimony. I think you've been great with Christ for your life, which I think is beautiful. And I love that.
Yes.
But, I grew up in a Christian household, but it was not your experience. And so I would say find my identity in Christ and what he says about me rather than what the world says, for sure. Because, Lex, you shared a bit of your story and your testimony of, having men, right? Mm-hmm. And that was how I dealt with my dad's death. Like, I lost my virginity 3 weeks after my dad died. Mm-hmm. I was looking for love and affection from men. Because I didn't get it from my dad. But if I just understood that my father loved me, right? It would have been a different experience. Mm-hmm. And again, totally. God has forgiven me. I know I'm a new creation. I'm a totally different person than I was then. But it would be nice to not have done that, right? Can't change it, but that's what I would tell myself. Mm-hmm. And then date to marry, I think, rather than just being like, hey, this is a good person. This is, whatever. Seeking a man of God, not just a Christian man, because it's very different, right? A man of God, you're going to see the fruits of the Spirit. He's going to love God more than he loves me. He's going to be able to lead me. Mm-hmm. So I think those would be my big things to tell myself.
Amazing. Those are even good for any age, I think.
Yeah.
We all need to hear those things, but the sooner we can start implementing, the better.
Correct.
So it's good for the young ones out there.
Yeah.
And we have to include our fur babies because we're all 3 fur moms. And so I couldn't skip this one. I know we're probably running low on time, but I couldn't skip this one because we're all
It's
three fur
important.
moms.
Yes.
So Dusty, your dog, I've seen he does sometimes do raw food diet, which I've seen. We were talking about Instagram and stuff. I've seen a lot of the raw food diet pop up, and I haven't tried the raw food diet with Camry, but I guess if someone can't do that, or if they do, like, what are tips for that if they can't? Because you've mentioned how it's so much more expensive here than it was in Australia to maintain that.
It's so crazy.
But regardless of what you can afford to do with your dogs, like, what are good choices?
Yeah.
If, you know, maybe you're going to do raw food or cook, or if you just have to go with like a bagged food.
Yeah. And again, there's no judgment. So my dogs were only raw fed until I came here, and I couldn't afford it, because literally it's like about $11 a day to feed Dusty raw, whereas it was like $3 to $4 Australian a day to feed him, which would be like $2.50. Yeah, like it's a massive difference, right?
Huge.
Massive difference. It's just a very different culture there, and what you can get. But if you have to go with a bag food, grain free, definitely. Just like we as humans, we don't need gluten. That's my one little health tip to take out for diet. I think no matter if you have a mental health issue, a hormone issue, a weight management issue, joint health issue, get rid of the gluten, you're going to feel better. Dogs don't need that either. So getting rid of the grains, I think, would be great. And then just making sure that it's not like byproducts in the list, just making sure it's real ingredients. Then I think, you know, a bag food, you do it. And then I would probably just add in like some fish oil. Like I give Dusty fish oil morning and night every day, just to help their coat and get the omega-3s in. If you can feed raw, then great. I personally, when I fed my dogs raw, I would keep in a vegetable component. So if you do that, it's about 70% meat, 10% bone, 10% offal. So offal is like anything that excretes. So liver, kidney, spleen, pancreas, those sorts of things. And then 10% vegetables in there as well. And I will say, I just put in my stories today, I was so shocked. I was in H-E-B and they rearranged like the meat section, and I actually saw that they have beef heart, which would be considered the meat component, not the offal component, but they had kidney, they had liver, both beef and chicken liver. And I was like, sweet. So you can actually buy your offal just at H-E-B now, which is great. And then for like the bone component, if it's at H-E-B, you can do like chicken feet or something. But a little tip here that I learned from someone at church, like her husband was like, hey, I think you can go to like the meat processor. Yeah. So I went to like the deer processor. You know, they literally, it was like a big old trash can of like deer head, deer, you know, esophagus and whatever. And they gave it all to me for free.
Wow. That's great. And there's a lot of people down in this region who hunt and fish. And a lot of times either they're restricted from selling those body parts, or people just throw them away because no one wants them. But here you go. Here's an opportunity to, one, you're not wasting
that. Exactly.
People who are against hunting and fishing, that's fine.
Sure. But utilize
for
the whole
that reason,
animal.
like you are utilizing the whole animal.
Yes.
You know, and that's there's a solution.
Correct. And everything. So like, the ribs and the spine are probably the best bones. Anything like a big animal, I wouldn't feed like weight-bearing bones, because it can crack their teeth. So like the marrow bones for dogs, that's a no-go. That can crack your dog's teeth real quickly. But like having them eat the ribs and the spine is great. And then even like have them lop off the ears, you know, that's what I had the guy do. So, you know, you can either dehydrate it or just give it to your dog. Get some of the fur. Fur is anti-parasitic. So, you know.
Really?
So I just feed Dusty. Like in Australia, we would get kangaroo tails with the fur on, or they would skin it and they would make like a little knot with the, and so you just give it to them that way, you know. Wow. So yeah, there's lots of options.
They are carnivores after all. Like that's what they would eat in the wild.
Okay, and I will tell you, even though Dusty doesn't eat a lot of food, and sometimes he's telling me he's hungry, so I'll make him like some green beans with bone broth, because he'll eat it with bone broth. So fill your belly, but not all the calories. But he has put on 15 pounds. And I exercise him twice a day. He's off the leash, you know, walking twice a day for 45 minutes, generally both times. And I know that's just from the change in his diet. So yeah, I know, my poor little man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for those tips.
Yes.
And do you have anything to add?
Can I add one more thing for the
Take
dogs? For the
it away.
dogs, around vaccines.
Okay, yes. I was going to skip it because I know we're running low on time.
I'm
but
fine on time. I don't care.
My mom has been bringing this up to me.
Yes.
I guess she's kind of seen some research about, you know, how a lot of humans are like waking up to, okay, do we really need these vaccines? And she was like, I don't know if you should be getting these vaccines.
Yes.
I don't know if dogs really need them.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I want to hear about
So
it.
it's, again, something that's way more common in Australia than here. But I would say for puppy vaccinations, get the puppy vax, all of those. But then from year 1, you can do what's called a titer test instead. So they just draw blood and they will test it to see, does your dog have the antibodies already against the things that they're going to vaccinate for? And I will tell you, when I left Australia, Sienna was 8. She had her puppy vax, never had another vaccination because they check the levels and then kind of score it. So if the levels are low, then they'll say, yes, you need to have this particular vaccination. If they're at quite a good level, they'll say, it looks good. We don't need to vaccinate this year. Let's check next year. We'll do another titer next year. For hers, it came back every single time we did it. Come back in 3 years. Come back in 3 years. Come back in 3 years. So now she'll be 11 on the 20th, and my ex-husband has said she still hasn't had another vaccination. Dusty will be 7 in April, and he's only ever had his puppy vax because the antibodies are so high. They're protected. They're already protected. So why do we need to give them a jab for something that they don't need? Right?
Wow.
So I'm a huge
fan.
fan.
Boarding places would accept that.
Some yes and some no.
Okay.
It depends on the place because, again, it's showing that they are protected
Right.
already.
Right.
So yeah, they're not going to spread anything because they're not getting it. Right. So yeah.
Wow.
And it's cheap.
When my mom was telling me this, I was like, okay, sure. I don't know where you're reading that. Sure. Like, who's talking about dog vaccines?
What about like preventatives, like flea tick,
yeah,
heartworm?
So again, in Australia, my vet was really lovely, and he was like, heartworm's not really a thing here in Perth, and so I didn't really do it. I did it like every few years. I would give them the injection, which lasts a year. Here, I've done that twice with Dusty, but I'm not overly concerned either. I do not do the flea and tick chemical stuff or even the chews.
Really?
So I had just used essential oils for so long, but I've noticed one of the places that I take him, he's had a couple of ticks on him. So I've just started using, and now that it's coming into this weather, I can't give a full testimony on it as yet, but it's called Wonder Side. Okay. So it's literally like you can just order it online, and it sounds terrible, but apparently it was on Shark Tank, and the ingredients are a lot of essential oils, all natural ingredients that is just a natural flea and tick, so you just spray it on them before you go out. There's nothing chemical in it, so that's what we're using now.
That's so good to know, because the flea and tick that you put behind the neck is
awful.
So bad for them.
It's related
so
to
toxic.
Seizures.
It's really bad.
Yeah.
That's good thinking on that one.
Yeah.
Really
That's stuff that like every month. I mean, when you're outside and near the creeks and stuff, we've just been trained to worry about it and think that's the only solution for it. But there's alternatives.
There are alternatives.
With everything.
Yes, with everything.
Well, I feel like you are like an inspiration to be your own advocate, like for
yes,
your health.
Yes.
Because I think so many of us, we just take what we hear, we just take it, and then we act on it. But you're a really great inspiration to advocate for yourself. And we know our bodies. We know something's not right.
Correct.
And also when we talk to a doctor, you don't have to take that at its word. Like you can go see additional doctors and
correct.
See alternatives. So
see a holistic practitioner, whether it's myself or someone else, it doesn't matter because we'll look at things a little bit different. And the only other thing I would say there too is don't wear a diagnosis if you get one as a label and your identity.
Correct.
Because it is part of your story, but it's not who you are. I know a lot of PCOS women say, I have PCOS. That's why I'm this way or that way or whatever.
That victim mentality.
Correct.
That is so detrimental to
your
future self and your success.
Exactly. It's important, and for me, I did feel relief when I got diagnoses, so I think that they can be helpful, but we can't have them be our identity, right? And sometimes even from a mental health aspect, people use that as an excuse. Like, I have anxiety. That's why I'm a jerk. So, no, you're just a jerk. Like, let's stop being a jerk.
Therapy.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, because I myself have gone through therapy. Yeah. I've gone through therapy for myself, and then I've also done couples therapy.
Yes.
Having said that, I feel like there's a balance between when you should seek therapy and when it starts becoming just a prop for you to identify what's wrong with you.
Yes.
And it just builds and builds and builds.
Yeah.
And like, I think that can be harmful.
Yes.
To us when it reaches that point. Because at what point are you growing and learning how to manage it and just exist with it?
Yes.
And then when are you like creating that as your identity?
Correct.
You know?
Yes. And if you're seeing a therapist for 5 years and you're dealing with the same issue, you probably A, need a new therapist, and B, you got to see what actually is the root of the issue.
Right.
Because again,
it
you can't
be
talk
a
away of
thing.
No. It's my job, and I think it should be the job of other health practitioners, therapists included, to put ourselves out of work. You should not have to work with me all the time. Right. You shouldn't. You should see me a few times and then you're done. Do you know what I mean? Like, then you become your own health advocate. Like, yes. And I'm not saying you would only see a therapist a few times, but it should not be forever.
Right. Yeah, I'm not saying don't. I'm just saying
correct.
Don't let that
be that crutch.
Yeah.
And again, your identity. Yes.
Maybe like through seasons of life, you might
exactly.
see them more, and then maybe you go to
maybe you learn
a few
how
times
to manage
a year.
A traumatic event.
Correct.
Or you really are going through a low season and you need that additional help.
Absolutely.
Because it does help to talk to people objectively and not. I would even say like sometimes it is better to talk to a therapist than it is a friend. Because they do have that ability
knowledge,
to be objective and not have an opinion, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying therapy's bad. I'm just saying.
No, neither.
And they're Christian-based therapists that are great to seek out, or Christian-based counselors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you want to take that approach to it.
Yeah. So. It's all tools in the toolbox. If any person or practitioner says, I will be the one to totally fix you, you need to find a new person, right? You need to have different tools in your toolbox, and you should have a team around you supporting your health and wellness, because I can't do everything, a therapist can't do everything, and a normal doctor can't do everything. We all have a role to play in your health and wellness. So it's just, we should coexist nicely together.
Your team.
Correct.
To all work.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was amazing.
We do have a coupon code.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for extending that for our listeners. So it's TWHS 20.
Yes.
And
that's what he said.
Yes. That's what he said. TWHS 20, and that will be for the healthy living from a Christian perspective.
Yes.
And we'll also drop links to Jen's website, her Instagram page.
Yep.
And then I think you had provided a link where people can sign up for
the
new program.
Yes.
Which is coming out March
17th on Monday.
Yes.
So excited.
3 days away
from
airing. So thank you guys so much. Happy and Healthy with Jen. If you're just listening and you're like, I don't know where to find those links. Happy and Healthy with Jen, 1 N. You can find her on Instagram, and then everything's linked on your profile as well.
Yeah.
So that's a great one-stop shop. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for tuning in.
Thanks, friends.
Yay.
Yay.